Are you interested in starting your own cash PT practice? Maybe a little side hustle practice right now because you're bored with what you do at work and you're seeing massive volumes of patients. I found the most success by going this route through a practice in a gym. And this is why I started the Gym PT Blueprint. The Gym PT Blueprint is really a program that shows you exactly how to be successful in the cash model, whether it's a side practice or you're diving head first like I did. This shows you exactly how to set your finances up correctly, how to set your practice up correctly, how to sell things, how to market yourself, and how to really convey your unique value to other people so that they'll want to pay you for it. If you are struggling to figure out how to set your practice up correctly, or if you're in practice and you're not making at least 5 figures a month at this point, you really should check out the Gym PT Blueprint. Head over to drdannymatta.com/products. That's DRDANNYMATTA.com/products to take a look at the Gym PT Blueprint and see how this program can help you become successful. So here's the question. How do physical therapists like us, who don't want to see 30 patients a day, who don't want to work home health, and have real student loans, create a career and life for ourselves that we've always dreamed about? This is the question, and this podcast is the answer. My name's Danny Matta, and welcome to the PT Entrepreneur Podcast.
All right, what's going on, guys? Doc Danny here. PT Entrepreneur Podcast, and it is Friday morning, bright and early. It's about 5:15-ish, headed into the office for my 6 a.m. Patient, and then I've got a little mastermind work. Actually, today is one of the days when I go and meet with the local mastermind that I'm a part of. So once a month we get together and we spend about 4 to 5 hours going over business development work and in a small group. And so prepped for all that, ready to go, excited for the day. And then it's Friday, man, so it's movie night, and get to hang with the kids. We're gonna ride bikes and climb some trees at the new house. So it's gonna be good. And I hope your Friday is gonna be as fun as mine. So on the ride today, what I wanted to talk about was just sort of addressing an email that I got from a PT, basically asking if I felt that the cash PT model is something that could work in a smaller town. And the town that they were referencing was about 250 people, or 250,000 people, I should say. I don't think the cash PT model would work very well in a town of 250 people, but 250,000 people is a different story. And this is definitely a smaller town, I would say. I mean, it's not a real small town, but I mean, I live in Atlanta, which is like 6 million people. So, big metropolitan areas like DC and Atlanta and New York, San Francisco, LA, like it's, you definitely hear about a lot more of these in these areas. And are some cities easier than others? Absolutely. I mean, I think that some of it depends on your practice act, and it also depends on, in some cases, income level of where people are at. I definitely have noticed, I would say of all the cities that I've worked with practitioners, it seems that DC is probably, I would put that at the top of best demographics for being able to have a successful out-of-network practice or cash practice. And I think a lot of it honestly has to do with the fact that people are just like in a hurry there, and they value their time quite a bit. And if you can solve a problem for them faster, they're willing to pay for it, and some of it has to do with demographics, right? Income level and all that. But also, in these bigger cities, cost of living is more, so you got to think about that. It's not like they have that much more disposable income. Sometimes it depends what they do, but in many cases they have to pay a lot more just to live there. So anyway, we'll get back to the topic of this small-ish town. So I would say a small to moderate-sized town, 250,000 people, is relatively small. And as you look at it, let's just think about the numbers of this, right? So I kind of broke down the math on this a little bit, but let's say that just 10% of those people that are in that city are actually active people that are, running or doing CrossFit or are trying to stay active and would seek out a service kind of like what you're probably going to provide. And that's probably a very, conservative percentage, by the way. It's probably higher. That's just 1 out of 10 people. And frankly, I think we could help 9 out of 10 people. It's just a matter of them knowing that, and you being able to express your value in a way that, makes them feel that they do want to work with you. And that's marketing. But let's say 10% of that population. Okay. So that's 25,000 people, 25,000 potential customers for you in a town that size. Now, let's say that you just see 1% of that 10% of the overall population. That's 250 people. So if you can get 1% of 10% of the population in, which is a very, very small fraction of the overall town, you can have a very profitable, successful cash practice from that. And a lot of it depends on how you set it up, right? So even with 1% of 10% of the population, right, a very small percentage overall, that's 250 people in the year. There's, say, new patients that you bring in. Now, here's a mistake that a lot of people make. Number one is they see people for 1 visit or 2 visits maybe only, and that's it. Now, there's definitely certain patients that are appropriate for that. Now, if you come in to see me and you've got a, low grade 2 ankle sprain or something like that, and, I might see you 1 to 2 times. It's nothing complex. Just want to make sure that we're addressing the problem, and not just addressing the symptoms. So keep this in mind. If you're seeing people 1 visit, you are not that fucking good of a physical therapist. I've got news for you. You're just creating symptom change and then trying to teach them as much crap as possible so that you feel like you're not charging them too much. I used to do this, okay? Now, listen, this is not the way to go. This is a terrible habit. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot, and it's something that I did very early on. And I was super proud of this. I'd be like, oh man, I'll see somebody 1 time and I get them better. Well, I wasn't getting them better. I would do a bunch of like symptomatic work, and then I would throw a bunch of exercises at them. I would program it out in an email that would take me an extra freaking hour to put together, and then I would send it to them, and I would think, man, this is amazing. I'm so good. Well, no, I just basically gave them a very concise plan that I should have talked to them and reassessed and progressed them over the course of a couple more visits. And they would have gotten a better response from that, honestly. They would have gotten a better long-term response instead of a symptomatic change and then throw a bunch of things at them that they need to do without any sort of structure or accountability associated with it. And it'll stunt your growth as a practitioner, as a business owner. If that's happening to you, you got to stop it. You got to learn how to sell yourself and understand that it's okay for you to tell people they need to come back for a follow-up. I used to have a real hard time with this. In fact, early on, I didn't even schedule people for follow-ups. I would literally just say, hey, you can schedule online. If you still feel like you need to come in, just go ahead and make yourself a follow-up. What a terrible idea that is, right? Like, no, I didn't know any better. All I knew was, I was a couple months out from the military, and I've never had to schedule anybody or reschedule somebody. I mean, we always had admin staff that did that, and I felt very uncomfortable with taking money from people, and I wanted to take as little as possible because I felt like it was a lot, right? We were charging $175 a session when we first started out, and I was super uncomfortable to even tell people what we were charging. And as soon as I get over the mindset shift of that to where, you look at these other things that are much more expensive that don't work nearly as well as us. Just look at an MRI and what that costs people. Plenty of people go down the route of getting imaging that does nothing for them. That costs, damn near 10 times as much as what I was charging for 1 hour of a PT visits. So, sorry, I kind of go off on a tangent there, but make sure that, number one, you're charging enough, but also that your average visit number is enough in order to sustain them being able to have a long-term change. And that comes down to your ability to explain to them how long they need to come in to see you, why, and being very confident about that. So if your average visit rate is like 1 to 2 visits, you're not a superstar. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And some people will fit in that category. But okay, if somebody comes in with 10-year history of lower back pain, you're gonna see them 1 or 2 times. Let's be honest. They've got a lot of complex things that they have to work through, and you're not fixing that in 1 or 2 visits. I don't care who you are. So that's a you problem, right? And you're gonna stunt your business growth because of that. Now, the other big area that I want you to think about is, once you get your price point right, which, I mean, I frankly just think everybody should be over $150 a visit. And it's just, you could say, oh yeah, my town won't justify that, whatever. Other people are charging this or that, but I see it happening in small towns with the companies that we work with, and over and over again, people will pay it, and they're happy to do so. So get your price point right, get your average visits right. And if you can get your average visits, ours are roughly between like 5 to 6 visits per new patient at this point. And now we're seeing a good bit more chronic stuff than we did whenever I first started out. It was probably closer to 3 to 4. When I first started out, I was seeing a lot more just like kind of acute CrossFit stuff. But let's say you get it at 5 to 6 and you see those 250 people, which is 1% of 10% of the population, super small percentage in a town that size. So 250 people at those visit averages, 5 to 6, you're talking about 100 to 120 patient visits a month at a good price point. And if you started where we did at 175, you're going to be generating somewhere between $210,000 and $250,000 in revenue. Now, that's a lot of money for a single practitioner to generate in a town of 250,000 people. You can definitely do it. And not only that, you may say, oh man, well, there's already a cash practice here. I hear this too. On the Facebook group that we have, which, by the way, if you're not a part of that yet, the PT Entrepreneurs Facebook group, you got to get into this, man. There's some really cool stuff happening in there. People sharing kind of success stories of things that are working for them, asking questions and getting like 15 responses from different members of the group that are sharing their experience. And I mean, you want a shortcut to success, you absolutely need to get into that. It's a free group. It's probably the best online resource for PT business information that's out there, and it's moderated by myself and my colleague Eve Gigi, and we're shocked at how just interactive people are, which is super cool to see. So if you need some help and head there, that's a great place to start. PT Entrepreneurs Facebook group. But when you look at your numbers and you look at your average visit rate, your cost per session, that's going to be huge. But also understand that just because there's another cash practice or a similar practice to where you're at, that doesn't mean that there's not opportunity for you to also have a practice in that same area, right? I look at it as, great, you already vetted that this is a viable place to have a practice. Now think of this way, like if McDonald's sets up shop somewhere, do you think Burger King says, oh, I'm not putting a Burger King there because McDonald's has that market locked down? They've got that street locked down. No, they're usually right freaking next to each other. I drive down Moreland, which is a street in Atlanta that goes down towards our house, and it's like Cookout, Crystal's, Wendy's, McDonald's, and then like Captain D's, and it's like they're all next to each other. They're all slightly different, but they're still fast food that will still have a similar demographic. And they're all in that same area because it's a busy street in a specific part of town, I guess. However they decide where they're going to put one of those things, they do it. And they do it next to each other because that area is vetted, and they know that there's enough of population for those businesses to survive. So if okay, so-and-so is doing a cash practice in this part of town, that means I can't do it there. That is not true. That means that there's a population there that can sustain a cash practice. And we already talked about this. 1% of 10% of the population in a small town is a very small percentage. There could be 100 different people that are seeing 1% of the population that have cash practices in a 250,000 person city. So keep that in mind. Are you worried about, not being able to sustain it? That's one thing. But the pie is really big, guys. Keep that in mind. The pie is big. You get your piece of the pie. And the more that we educate the masses on what we do, the pie gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the more there is for everybody to actually be able to sustain long-term successful businesses. So I hope that this makes sense. If you're in a smaller, moderate-sized town, Don't freaking worry about it. Put your head down, do the work, get after it, get a plan. And if you're looking to start a practice or a little side hustle, I mean, shameless plug, 100%, check out the Gym PT Blueprint. The thing is helping people all over the country. It's so crazy to see people be successful in these smaller towns, big towns, different niches. It's a plan that's going to help you get organized going forward. It's context. There's a lot of content out there, but this gives you context and organization to what you need to be doing. So, guys, thanks so much for listening. As always, let me know if you have any questions for this podcast in particular. And if you haven't done so yet, head to the PT Entrepreneurs Facebook group and request to join.
Hey, real quick before we go, I just want to say thanks so much for listening to this podcast. If you're one of the people that's already headed over to iTunes and left me a review, I really appreciate it. There's been over 50 iTunes reviews, and all of them being 5 stars, that have been left on this podcast since we started in August. That's awesome. And I read every single review. I take every little piece of advice that you give me in there, any criticism, any positive feedback that you have, I read all of it. And it's amazing to see that we're even getting reviews internationally at this point. So if you're one of the people that's reviewed the podcast, thanks so much. If you're an active listener of this podcast, I highly, highly encourage you to subscribe to the podcast and go to iTunes and leave me a short review. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and it really does help me get this information in front of more people. So guys, thanks again for your time, and keep listening.